Hello and welcome to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and it is the Friday Bulletin. Happy just to be back talking all things Celtic with Tony Haggerty. How are you doing, Tony?
Very well, Laura. Yourself?
I'm absolutely grand. It's the end of another week and we're on the eve of Celtic returning to action, so I can't wait for that. It's been... I don't mind the international football, but I have to say there's nothing like watching a Celtic play. So, and I'm also joined by Jim Orr as always. How you doing, Jim?
Good, Laura. Glad to be back, yeah.
Glad to have you back off the back of what I hear was a very successful run with your latest publication, Bend It Like Bertie. How did it go?
Great, a lot of fun. Mr. Haggerty came along, so a more objective opinion than mine. Good fun, fantastic actors. Bertie was meant to come, but hadn't been too well the last few weeks. But John Fallon came, and John Hughes came and took a wee bow on the stage in the opening night and had a wee cuddle, which was quite poignant in the whole scheme of things. But the feedback's been really positive, so we move on. Good.
Great to hear. Yeah, I saw loads of pictures and it was just another indication of things hopefully getting a little bit more back to normal, and what better way to do it than to be surrounded by other Celtic supporters taking in Celtic content. But congratulations on that. And thanks everybody for joining us today on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. We're in 8 different locations. If you aren't already, get subscribed, and there's daily content coming from A State of Mind, not just football content, music and all sorts of things. If you get subscribed now, you can be entered in the, I don't know if it's now weekly prize draw, but certainly a monthly prize draw for different prizes if you're subscribed to one of the channels, so get involved with that. On to the important stuff, talking about Celtic, but before we go to the present day, we'll talk about the anniversary today of the death of the greatest manager in Celtic history, one of the greatest managers in football history. Jock Stein unfortunately passed away 36 years ago today, before his time, and the world lost a huge influence on both football and on general culture within the country. Tony, I don't know how much you remember of the great man, but if you're anything like me and any Celtic supporter, you've certainly done your research in the years since. What are your thoughts on Jock Stein today, 36 years on from his death?
I was 13 when Jock Stein died. I was in my friend's house watching the Scotland-Wales game, and like everyone else, was that momentous high that they got the result to clinch the World Cup finals playoff place against Australia, to the tremendous low that he passed away. But I mean, everybody knows about Jock Stein. There's not a lot that you can say. You know, Jock Stein built Celtic. Celtic as we know it is down to one man, and that's Jock Stein. You know, and I tried to do something this week. I managed to do something this week, and I wrote a tribute piece today which appeared in the Celtic Way, but I wanted to do something a bit different because, as I say, everybody knows that he was a great man and a very successful man and his achievements. So I spoke to Peter Donald, who was an ex-SFA secretary and an and the former Scottish Football League secretary, and Peter was there the night at Ninian Park in Cardiff, and so he painted this picture, and he told me a couple of things, and the 2 things that stood out for me was where Souness kept a vigil outside the door where the medics were in, and he turned to everybody and said, "He's gone." And it's 2 words that reverberated around the football world. And just the devastation that caused, and just the sense of tragedy and loss. And then, excuse me, and then Peter also told me that everybody flew back to Edinburgh Airport. We usually flew back to Glasgow, and everybody went their separate ways, the team, the national team and everybody. And he just said something that was quite poignant, and you can see it. There was one bag, a solitary bag on the carousel going round, and it was Jock Stein's, and he was the man that to pick up Jock Stein's bag. And just that picture in your head of something enormous and tragic had happened. And so I wrote that today, and people have got in touch to say it was a very poignant piece and very nice, and I thank people that have read it. And you know, I I try not to make people cry on a Friday, and it's very
You
hard.
feel miserably.
I'm very sorry about that. But yeah, just, Celtic owe everything to Jock Stein. The kind of, if you know your history, it starts at Jock Stein, really, doesn't it? And how he built the club and what it has become, one of the world's most famous footballing institutions. And there's also a film, Johnny Owen film, called Three Kings, which also tells you that, and all the humble beginnings. And I said at the end of the piece that Bill Shankly got it right when he said after the 67 European Cup win, John, you're immortal. I don't think any three words can sum up how every Celtic supporter, and most football supporters, would feel about Jock Stein. And I'll stop talking now because you can hear it in my voice. I'm getting a bit
It is an emotional thing to think back on. I think as a younger supporter, we take a lot of pride in events and in times at the club that none of us saw, that none of us remember, and it's down to one man. It's down to Jock Stein and the legacy that he left. Certainly when he was told, John, you're immortal, there's no truer word than the fact that we're still talking about him today and will be for years to come. So that's absolutely true. Jim, your memories of the great man Jock Stein, both as a Celtic manager and his influence on Scottish football, what do you make of things now that we're so far on from his passing?
I should put my hanky down now, which I brought specially because I knew Mr. Haggerty was going to make us all greet as usual. She just actually stopped the show here. See you next week. I put a play on last week, another shameless plug for my play, and basically it was about the 65 Scottish Cup win, and that's when Jock Stein came back. And what was interesting about the last play that I put on Bradburn is that younger fans didn't understand the whole Rangers going for 10 in a row, couldn't understand why Celtic was so bad. But Celtic were worse in 65. And Celtic were Hibs, basically. That's who they were. They were Hibs. So if you try to explain to a younger person what was Celtic like before Jock Stein, they were Hibs, basically. They hadn't achieved very much. Or they had achieved a lot at the start of the century. They won 6 in a row at the start of the 20th century and done very little apart from the kind of one-off things that they had. And in the play last week, as Tony will recall, I put on a 30-second video in between scenes. And one of the ones I put up was which I called the roll of dishonour, basically going from 54 through to 65. So you put up 55, 56 in the league, 7th Scottish Cup runners up. Next season, 4th. There was 9ths, there was 8ths, there was all sorts of stuff in there. So nothing happened. From 54 through to 65, nothing at all. So people think things are bad now, go back then and look at it. And towards the end of the play, I then put the league table up at the end of that season. Celtic were 8th at the end of that season. Clyde were above Celtic at the end of that season. So that was fairly typical, and it was Jock Stein that, within 2 years took a group of underachieving players and made them the best team in Europe, or arguably the best team in the world. And he's the guy that put Celtic on the map. And that's where all the fans' expectations come from, because he set the benchmark, but the benchmark's far too high. You will never achieve that benchmark, and that's why in the 67th minute of every game, the fans sing that song, because they recognise that you will never achieve that. And unfortunately, we think what in football these days with the money, it's kind of like out of question. So, as you both said earlier, Jock Stein is the guy who put Celtic on the map, and as a club, I think they owe him everything.
They certainly do, and he came so close to nearly doing it again in 1970, as we well know, and it would have made things absolutely even more great than they were. But such a special thing to have that single victory in Lisbon and everything it means for the club, and it's down to one man. Thanks everybody for commenting on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, everywhere you can do. Soph Scott's on YouTube says Jock Stein is a legend and a giant of football. Ryan Kelly says brilliant words again, Tony. And Jim Hannaway says that he read the article on the Celtic Way from Tony, says it's a fantastic article. So for anybody looking for the content Tony provides, and certainly many other Celtic contributors, you can do it, as you can see on the sponsor here, the Celtic Way. Tony, I believe it's is the offer still on for, is it £1 a month for 6 months and then up to £3 thereafter, or?
I think it's changed. It's now £2.99 for the first 2 months, and
Right.
Thereafter, I think it might go up to three.
Yeah, so if you're looking for even more Celtic content, go onto the Celtic Way and do that, because there's plenty there, as well as Tony's contributions. I believe our own Amy Canavan writes for it, and certainly other people as well.
She does indeed. Yeah, Amy's got a column, a weekly column as well. So yeah,
fantastic. So get on there. That if that's not a stamp of the mark of the quality of the work there that Tony and Amy are both writing on there, then I don't know what is. But we'll move on to more modern sort of considerations. Not quite fully up to date on current matters, but Tony, I messaged you this quote from Christopher Ajer, our dearly departed defender, who is now playing for Brentford, the true European giants Brentford. He says here, and he was quoted saying this is on the Odds Change Twitter account, so I don't know where the original source was, but he says here, "It's natural when you play too many matches at a level that isn't high enough. I have incredible respect for the Scottish League, but there will be too many matches where I am not challenged enough. I think the Premier League, it's not possible to complain about." Now, I read that, and the first thing that came into my mind is, as always with players on an international break, I don't know if they know that the internet exists and that you will come across these quotes rather more easily than you might have done in years gone by. The other thing being, to say that he wasn't challenged enough in the Scottish Premier League might have seemed true up until last season, but I think there was plenty of times he was more than challenged enough last season. Tony, I might be a little bit touchy about this and a little bit defensive as far as it's concerned, but for a guy who's yet to prove himself at the level he so desperately wants to play at, what did you make of the comments that he made?
He's got every respect for the Scottish League, and then in the next sentence just destroys it and disrespects it. The Scots' earth policy towards the Scottish League and the league and the team that made him a household name, so much of a household name that he signed for Brentford. You know what I mean? So, you know my thoughts on Christopher Ajer. I was pretty vociferous in my criticism of him. Didn't think he had any positional sense. He couldn't head it. When he strolled forward with the ball, he looked very cumbersome, very, very lanky, and I said that he would go for whatever someone was willing to pay for him. And just because he went for 13 million quid doesn't make him a good player. It's the going rate for someone who rates you, and it was Brentford that rated him. So be it. But I find it pretty disingenuous of Ajer, to say he wasn't challenged. Celtic finished 25 points behind Rangers last season. This is a man that ducked out the road of Alfredo Morelos shot at Ibrox. Actually, physically ducked out the road of a ball coming his way as a defender. I look at guys like Virgil van Dijk. Virgil van Dijk never tires of talking up Celtic and saying that Celtic made him the player he is today. And he might have thought that he wasn't challenged in the league, but he's never been disrespectful. Celtic gave Virgil van Dijk the platform to take his game to a greater stage, and he has, and he's ever so thankful and respectful for that. And that's all you can ask for from ex-Celtic players. And yeah, there might be a bit of lost in translation, but I don't think so, because he seems very. It's very definite there, isn't it? There's a definitive there that I wasn't challenged enough, And I think the very fact that, I said he never left a legend, even though he scored the penalty that sealed the quadruple treble. I will forget Christopher Ajer's very existence in a few years, because of my thoughts about him as a footballer. But I just think that's very disrespectful to all the Celtic supporters who paid over their hard-earned to watch him. And if that's the way he felt, then he should have left sooner, in my opinion. And I'm glad that we got as much as we did for him. And yeah, whatever happens in his career, so be it. I won't be keeping an eye on it, that's for certain.
Yeah, I have to say I was disappointed to read it. If not from the fact that, like you say, whether there's truth in what he says or not. And listen, I'm not here to say that the Scottish League is one of the better leagues in the world, or that it's anywhere near the level of opposition he'll be playing against week in, week out. It won't be. Having said that, there's some pretty average teams in the Premier League as well. it's just about a level of respect, I think, for the opportunities he's been given at Celtic, the platform he's been given there, and for the fact that he is now playing in the Premier League because he was a Celtic player. Jim, what do you make of those comments from Ajer, and what does it say about, to your mind, the kind of modern day attitude? Is this an individual attitude according to Ajer, or do you think it's a more widespread thing?
I'm going to defend the big chap. I'm going to go against you two guys today. I think I take anything written down in newspapers with a pinch of salt. Mm-hmm. If somebody thrusts a microphone in front of your face and asks you questions, sometimes you might not say what you would like to say, or sometimes you might say something that maybe you don't phrase it the way you would like to say. And I think what the big man was trying to say is, I've moved on to a higher standard of football, I'm looking to earn a few bob more. That's the point he's trying to make. It may have been a bit clumsy.
Why not say that?
Sorry?
Why not say that?
Well, I think it's difficult. I think our expectations of football players are sky high. He's a young guy. He's been asked a question. He has to formulate an answer to that. So on this podcast, if Laura asks me a question, I can't say, hold on for 2 minutes and I'll think about this and I'll give you a better answer. If Laura asks me a question, I'll give an answer. And then maybe afterwards I think, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Or maybe I shouldn't have phrased it that way. You know, I've got a lot of respect for Ajer. He came as a young guy. It cost his buttons. We sold him for whatever the number is, 15, 16 million pounds. He always gave 100%, irrespective of whether you think he's a good, bad or indifferent player. He always gave 100%. He stepped up to take that penalty to win the quadruple treble. So I admire the guy. He's a young guy as well. He's only, 22, 23. He's a young guy trying to make his way in football. Maybe some of these things he said in the interview, he could have phrased a wee bit better. But I think, as fans, I think we expect too much of football players. As I've said before in the podcast, these are ordinary people doing an extraordinary job. And I'll give you a wee example of this. Getting back to the play. That's all I do is get back to the play, basically. Des McLean, who was in the play, was interviewed by a newspaper a couple of weeks ago. And as a throwaway line, he said, it'd be great to take this to the Vegas convention. That became the headline. Celtic play destined for Vegas. Right? I got interviewed a couple of weeks ago as well, another newspaper, and they said, have you got a spare 15, 20 minutes? I'll give you a call, or should we email you the questions? Email me the questions. Because if you email me the questions, I'll put down the answers that I want to be put down. So that's what I did, hoping to be copy and paste it. I see the article, and there's 2 or 3 glaring mistakes in it that I didn't say at all in this email. And I'm not saying they did that intentionally, and it's no big deal in the great scheme of things. The point I'm trying to make is that take these things with a pinch of salt, because the only point he was trying to make is he's moving to a higher standard, it's a short career, and I'm trying to earn a bit of money. So I think that's a known story, in my opinion. I think it's a known story.
I get all that, Jim, but he doesn't need to be disrespectful to the Scottish League. You just don't have to say that you weren't tested enough. I get his motivations for leaving, and I wish him well, but as I say, I'm not going to keep tabs on his career because I don't particularly care now. But
do you not think he was being honest then? That he wasn't tested enough in a lot of the games?
Well, maybe
he wasn't.
Maybe he wasn't, but
that's been honest then.
Aye, but I find that a bit disingenuous. You know, I think it's a bit of a slap in the face. You know,
I'll put this to you, Jim, just as a counterpoint. If he wasn't tested enough, why did he play so poorly so often last season? Surely that's an indication he was tested.
What were all the games he played poorly?
I can think of multiple performances against Rangers where he
ducked
played
down
poorly.
Against Rangers at that shot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no question that. But I would imagine Christopher Ajer played more good games than bad games, and I think there was games that he wasn't tested because of how we play. We were on the front foot. I think last year is an exception. We'll accept last year was an exception, but up to last year, you could say that quite regularly. He wasn't tested in a lot of games, so I think that's been quite honest. And it depends how you interpret that. And as I said, you know, he's a young guy. He's had a microphone thrust in front of him, and he said some things that maybe he might look back and say, maybe I shouldn't have phrased it that way. Maybe I should have said that. And that's why, as I said, I mean, we now live in an age where everything's on Twitter. It's trial by Twitter. You know, back in the old days, if you go back to 98, 23 years ago, I was at Celtic Park with about a third of the ground booed Fergus McCann. Why did they do that? Because the papers made him out to be this ogre, Saddam Hussein. And the fans bought that hook, line and sinker, and they booed the guy. And then years later they thought, you know what, we shouldn't have done that. Yeah, because all that stuff in the papers, that actually wasn't true. And nowadays we've got Twitter, and everyone uses Twitter. So you put any old nonsense on Twitter and people will pile on, and it's trial by Twitter. So I don't get too, I mean, I sound as if I'm bothered about this. I'm not bothered about this. You made a comment, pinch of salt, we move on, it's no big deal. But I get the point. Celtic podcast, the guy's made a comment, it's worthy of a bit of a discussion. You two think this, I think that, but that's football, it's just about opinions.
Yeah, I think it's, to be fair, I think it's reflected in the comments. We've got AJSC Technology videos on YouTube saying, I think what Ajer said was fair, and it's no shock to me that he feels that he wants to be tested more in the EPL, which again I think is the point that we were making. It's just there's a difference between saying that and degrading Scottish football. He says, where is the problem, guys? Also, Ajer is a young guy and English isn't his first language, which is kind of the point Jim was making there. It's maybe been worded a little bit clumsily. But Michael, the boy on Twitter, says, yes, he played good games in Scotland, but he was very average in Europe and in games against Sevco, so or Rangers, I should say. I think that's the thing, though. I think we will time will tell what happens, and I think that was part of my issue. Was I don't have a problem with him saying a lot of the things he wants to say, but I think he's a bit early on in his career in this new league to be overly confident about how he's going to do there. But we shall wait and see. We're just at the end of an international break, obviously, guys. So Celtic are on their way back. Unfortunately, breaking news this morning, according to, I think, David Friel in The Sun, although we've had no official confirmation from club sources, that Kyogo Furuhashi is likely to be out for up to a month with a knee injury that he picked up in the international match between Japan and China on Tuesday. Tony, I said multiple times prior to obviously signing Giakoumakis, we were only one injury, one suspension, one small problem away from having real issues up front. Giakoumakis is certainly going to be covered for that, I would think. But do you see Furuhashi's absence for what's likely to be around 7 games being a massive issue over the next month or so?
No, it'll clearly be an issue because of the start he's made. But, that's what happens. That's the risk you run when you send your players on international duty. These things happen. It's part and parcel of football. Nothing can be done about it. Yeah, he'll be missing for 7 games. Will it be a big loss? Of course, it'll be a huge loss. But that's why you buy other players. Giakoumakis is now going to have to step up to the plate, or if he turns to Ajer, we just think there's going to be Giakoumakis, so that's why you strengthen in certain areas during the transfer window, because everybody, as soon as Kyogo made the start that he made, everybody was worried about him getting injured. Well, that's come to fruition. He's now injured. So to quote Jim, you have to move on. You have to put Giakoumakis in there and tailor a system to suit a striker like that, or get Ajer in there and tailor your system to suit him. But whatever happens, Kyogo's not going to be there for the next 7 games, the next month. We know that now, or that's certainly what's conjectured, not exact, not gospel truth, but that's seemingly what's going to happen. So we deal with it. We have to deal with it. Can't mourn the fact that he's not going to be there. You just get on, and these are things that happen in football. Footballers get injured. It's a fact. What do? Stop them from representing their country, which is the biggest honour most footballers say in their careers. So no, you don't. But it's, I think a collective sharp intake of breath when they saw that Kyogo had left the field injured, and they were hoping. Some of the scenarios were saying he was going to be out to February. So, if that's the case, I'll take the 7 games. I will take the month, and as Jim says, we move on and we just deal with the games as they come. Yeah, there's some tough games in there, but it's going to be a tough season. So bring it on.
Yeah. Well, Jim, before we look at the games ahead, Ross County included, and 2 new Europa League matches that are coming up within the next month or so, Furuhashi's absence is going to be badly felt, but it's also going to put pressure on Giakoumakis to make a running start, if you like, or hit the ground running, don't you think?
It's not the fact that he hasn't played for a while. Giakoumakis. I can't imagine he's going to get thrust in if that's the case. I'd have thought, if there's ever going to be a chance for Ajer to make it, then it's tomorrow. Basically, home game, Ross County, haven't made the greatest of starts. If he starts Jota tomorrow and if Abada plays the way he plays at Celtic Park as opposed to the way he plays away from Celtic Park, then he'll make lots of chances. So I'd like to think Ajer maybe kick-starts his Celtic career tomorrow. I think we'll be taking a risk playing somebody who hasn't played for such a long time. If he managed to get 2-3 goals ahead, then hopefully maybe save the last half hour or so. But I'd like to see Ajer tomorrow. I was a bit concerned that when we were pushing for an equaliser at Ibrox 2 weeks ago, he was nowhere to be seen. I thought that was quite surprising, and maybe it told a story. But I think these must, and sometimes, we always remember when Lee Griffiths was injured for the Glasgow Derby game, and Musa came in and scored his hat-trick, and off you go. So you never know. Yeti might come in tomorrow, score a hat-trick, and that kick-starts this season. So I'd like to see him tomorrow to see what he can do. If he's not picked tomorrow, then you've serious question marks as to whether he's getting the future at all at Celtic Park. It's a Yeti for me tomorrow, yeah.
Tony, what do you think of that? Just, we were talking, or I was assuming that Giakoumakis would come straight in just because he's possibly had a couple of weeks to bed in and hopefully maybe ready for tomorrow. But as Jim says, he's not. I don't think he's played in a while, and he possibly isn't ready. What do you think Ajer can do to nail that position down for himself? Has the boat already sailed on that one, or do you think there's a 4th, 5th or 6th chance there for him?
I thought it was very telling, the fact that he was looking for a goal at Ibrox and Ajer never featured at all. That spoke volumes to me, and then they went out in the transfer window and signed Giakoumakis. Now, I know who the supporters will want to see tomorrow, and I don't think it'll be Ajer. They'll want to see Giakoumakis leading the line just to see what he's got. And he's had a couple of weeks to get some work into him. I know he's not played for a while, but that's beneficial, getting players on the training ground and getting some hard yards into them. So he'll maybe think about that and maybe say, do you know what, full house crowd, because it's a sellout for a Ross County game, an rare 3 p.m. kickoff. So the conditions are, off the field are there for somebody to come in and possibly hit the ground running. Or if he starts with Ajer, then that might be the olive branch to Ajer to say, right, resurrect your Celtic career. But if Ajer's nowhere near it, then you have to think, like what Jim said there, that it could be curtains for Ajer and Celtic. And I've got a feeling he might start with Giakoumakis, I've got to be honest, because, he's got a decent scoring pedigree from last season. Whether that could come into the fact that he's not played in a while, but, he's going to, needs must, he's going to have to do one of two things, play Ajer or Giakoumakis. So I'd prefer Giakoumakis myself because I'm not convinced about Ajer. But
the interesting thing is that Ajer featured in the match programme. That's kind of a strange one.
Right, I wasn't aware of that, Jim. Right, okay.
There's like 2 photographs. There's like the heavyweight Ajer and the lightweight Ajer. It's quite bizarre looking. But I think if he doesn't start Ajer tomorrow, I don't think he's got any future at all. Yeah. And I think
I'm inclined.
I think as a manager, you're looking for an opportunity. And tomorrow, I think, is the opportunity. We've played really well at home, scoring goals for fun, 60,000 people there, feel-good factor. Two wingers who should make lots of chances. Yeah. This is his chance. If he doesn't play tomorrow, I think he's finished.
I also think the same way that Giakoumakis, you might think, because it's Ross County, and the standard of opposition, they've had a bad start, that he might think, okay, maybe give you an hour, big man, and see how it goes. That would possibly be in my thinking.
Yeah, Robert Arbuckle on YouTube has said that it's his understanding that Giakoumakis hasn't played since May, so that it would be asking a lot, but it will be interesting to see. Perhaps even if he doesn't start, if he gets some minutes under his belt, that would be great. Another point from John Logan on YouTube here, and Jim, I'll come to you on this one first. Tony said that the manager had one of two choices, Ajer or Giakoumakis, but John Logan on YouTube suggests that potentially Abada through the middle is an option. What do you make of that?
No, I think Abada for me has shown that, I'd said before, that I think Ange has to have a plan A and plan B. Plan B when you go away from home. And Abada, for me, was completely anonymous at Ibrox. And apart from the first minute against AZ, completely anonymous. and we don't pay £3.5 million for people to show good form at home to St Mirren and Dundee. They have to step up. And he was the main guy, Ibrox, who didn't step up. A few didn't step up, but he was the main culprit for me. So I don't like the idea of him playing through the middle. The wide open spaces of Celtic Park suit Abada. So get him wide and don't start messing about and playing players in the wrong positions, what have you. I know we've struggled to get a squad together, but we've got options for a centre forward. We've got 2 centre forwards there. Play one of them. Don't play a winger up the centre. That's just, to me, that's just not a particularly good idea.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And Tony, you're nodding along, saying I think you feel the same way.
He doesn't need to be a tinker man, does he?
No.
Let's be honest, because he's got natural. The players have a natural position for a reason. So play them in a natural position. And he admitted himself after the Rangers game that he played Kyogo in the wrong position. So learn from that. Shows that you've learned from that and just put a square peg in a square hole. So that's. And I agree with Jim. Why would you put a wide man through the centre? Because he has to learn his lesson from Ibrox. And that was, and as I said after it, that was maybe Ange's way of saying sorry to the fans. I called it wrong. I should have played him through the middle. So I think he'll be more mindful of that and play a centre forward through the middle. Call me old fashioned, but I like players in a natural position.
Yeah,
which is something I liked about Ange last week. I mean, I wasn't on last week, so I didn't get to talk about Ibrox. But the fact he came out and just said, "Look, I made a mistake here, guys." He has to learn quickly because he's not there because of force. I mean, anyone can do hindsight. He's there for foresight, and I think the majority of the fans, I thought it was a bad decision before the ball was kicked. But yet he still went with that, and he's learned lessons. My big concern is we get to the end of the season and we look back at that game and think, you know what, that was quite important. If we end up losing the league with 2 or 3 points, anyway, going to be positive stuff.
Time will tell, but I think like you say, a lot of us, myself included, who's on the match coverage, we're calling it out as a bad decision, if not at half time, certainly before the match as well.
Also, Lord, if I'm butting there, kind of just started the Justice for Kevin Graham campaign. Right, so because I saw Kevin come on to Axom and I agree with everything he said and he got a red card. So justice for Kevin. Right, so
I think we'll move on from that one quickly. Lots of comments coming through as well, Tony, and I'll come to you on this one first. Lots of people talking about James Forrest and potentially him being hopefully back to fitness and be able to come back into the team. He seems to have been in and out a little bit, struggling to get over the long-term injury that he's had. Surely there's got to be a place for him in the team somewhere if we can get him fit enough. We've got Jota, we've got Abada, yes, we've got Furuhashi, Yakimakis. We're almost spoilt for choice given how much we were struggling before, but Forrest's got to be in there somewhere if we can get him in, surely.
Got options now. Up front, which is great. And I think James Forrest is a fly in James Forrest. He divides opinion amongst the Celtic supporter, but he's the most decorated Celtic player there, isn't he? He's won a hatful of medals, and I like Forrest. I think he's a valid contributor. He's creative and he can score goals, and he's worked at his game. Brendan Rodgers got the best out of him, and he's been pretty consistent therein. So There's always should be a place for Forrest, whether that be on the bench, coming on as an impact player, or starting. But I think the problem is, again, going back to what Jim said right at the top, the problem about Ajer, people expect too much from Forrest at times, I think. And just because he's been there so long, it's like, right, James, turn it on. He's had a very serious injury that's kept him out for a long, long time. So it's natural that you're going to take time to bed in again. But the games he's played, he's done not too badly. And I think if you can shoehorn him in somewhere, either you start him or you bring him on, then I think that's a good thing for Celtic moving forward. And Ange will know, maybe just letting him, ease him in gently, because you don't want to set him back again by running the risk of being out for a lengthy spell as well. So I think he's treating Forrest rightly. And once he's up to speed, then it's up to Forrest to be competitive alongside Abada and Jota for those wide positions.
Yeah, Jim, Tony raises an interesting point there, and it's probably something that we didn't do well enough with other players. Scott Brown springs immediately to mind about, managing players as they get older, managing the amount of football that they play. Callum McGregor's another one who we're not perhaps handling well. Do you think, as much as, he's coming back from a massive injury, James Forrest, do you think perhaps his role in the team might change with the options that we have, and that he won't be a guaranteed starter throughout the season? It will be about rotation?
I think it all depends on the squad depth, Laura, and we've taken our time, to get to where we are just now, and I think we still think maybe we're one or two players short of having the depth of squad that we need. But to me, football's dead simple. I mean, if you've got a player playing well, then that player stays in the team. If his form shades off, then he's out. If James Forrest was fit, for me, he'd be straight in tomorrow. Because after the last two performances by Abada, that's not good enough, son. You're out, Forrest is in. Yep. And the same goes for Anthony Ralston. I'll keep Anthony up because he's not letting anyone down. If his form starts to shade, he's out, new guys in. So you need a decent squad depth to let you actually make those changes, and then hopefully you stick with the form players. I'm like Tony, I'm a big fan of Forrest. I think he's made a significant contribution in the number of years that he's been at Celtic Park. If somebody else is playing better than him just now, he'll have to wait his turn. But if he's fit just now, I've got no idea whether he's fit just now, but if he's fit just now, I'd play him tomorrow and leave it at Abada, because you have to make the point. With two big games there, son, you've only up to it. That might be okay from the team you came from, but here we need to win every single game. Not good enough, you're on the bench. The next time you get the chance, son, get stuck in there. But anyway, I am a big fan of Forrest.
And using your rationale as well, Jim, with Abada, people forget he's only 19. He's a young guy too, and he's, came from a different football and culture into Scotland. So, I would, I agree with you that his performance has been substandard the past two games. And if Forrest is fit, then that's a big call for the manager tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it is a big call for the manager tomorrow. Another area in which we've got a big call, Jim alluded to it about whether Ralston will remain in the team, but obviously we've got our new number 5, our new iconic number 5, Liam Scales, coming in now. I believe his position that he can play, he can either play centre half or left back. Tony, I'll come to you first on him. I saw some chat earlier on in the week in the pod about the number 5 signifying that he's possibly going to be considered the first choice member of the team and much less of a squad player than some people might have thought. Having since read some quotes of his, it would appear that he was keen to choose the number 5 himself because of the meaning attached to it with being the Celtic number 5. So the truth perhaps lies somewhere in the middle. What do you feel are his chances of cementing a place in the team, given based on the limited amount I presume you'll have seen of him and the comments he's made since coming in?
I think he's certainly got confidence in his own ability, and the more you read about Liam Scales and the more that people have watched him, they're telling you he'll be a bright star of the future for Celtic. That's fair enough. He's coming in to be as competitive as possible. But can you drop Anthony Ralston at this moment in time? I say no. Because Ralston has earned the right to start in any game this season. He's been fully committed. He's turned up in a lot of the big games. Even the ones at Alkmaar that they lost, he was one of the better players. Against Rangers at Ibrox, he didn't let himself down. In fact, again, he was one of the better players. And I wrote that I'm of the kind of mind that I work in the Tour de France premise. If you've got the yellow jersey, or the hoop jersey in this case, you keep it until such time when Jim says that your form dips and the manager says to you, right, you can maybe do with a spell out the team. Also think Anthony Ralston's riding the crest of a wave, and you would destroy the boy's confidence a bit if you just dropped him for no reason, because you wanted to see something else. I think if his form dips, then you take him aside and you say, look, just not been at it, in my opinion, for the past couple of games. I'm going to leave you out. But you can't leave him out now, because this is as good as it gets for the boy, and he's strung together a consistent run of form, which every Celtic supporter wanted him to do.
Sorry, just to clarify, is that you assuming that then Scales would come in at left back and Juranovic would switch to right back in that case, or just in general, the general point about keeping your place?
Yeah, I think so. But we have now healthy competition in certain areas. wingers and now defenders. But I just think Anthony Ralston, you can't bomb Anthony Ralston out of the team at this moment in time, in my opinion. I know you might want to see the likes of Scales and see how they can do, but Anthony Ralston has to go off the boil in all form for him to be left out of the team. But again, I don't make those calls. It's up to the manager, so he'll know better than me because, as I always get back to it, application and training, he'll see that. And sometimes players coming in give the player who knows that they're trying to take their jersey extra impetus, and you take.
I don't want extra impotence.
Cross between the two.
What shows us today?
I meant impetus, yeah. And so, yeah. Well, I think Anthony Ralston's there on merit and stays for the time being, certainly.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion point, Jim, and it kind of veers me off in a certain direction that I've been thinking about. I've been having discussions with people during the week about Anthony Ralston in particular, and this idea that he might have become like a kind of go-to name for people to slag off when we were doing poorly, as the kind of sign of everything that's wrong with Celtic, if you like. Do you think there was a bit of hysteria and a bit of hyperbole that became attached to his name? Because I don't actually think he was ever as bad as he was sometimes made out to be. And yes, I know we'll be accused of revisionism and all sorts of things, but do you think there was a bit of hyperbole and hysteria attached to that people are now kind of second guessing themselves?
Yeah, I think save the fact, Laura, that football fans are fickle. Either somebody's brilliant or he's rubbish, and there's nothing in between. If I go back to the Liam Scales thing, the reason we lost the Glasgow derby is we got 2 centre-halves and they got 3 centre-halves. And until we sort that out, I think we'll struggle for future Glasgow derbies, because I've mentioned in the past somebody like Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor's a very, very good football player. He's not the biggest of players. He's not going to help to defend set pieces, and he's not a threat for our set pieces. And I thought the Glasgow derby was, pretty even game, nothing much in it. The quality of football was relatively poor. But what decided it is that they had 3 big centre-halves at set piece against our 2. And those 3 centre-halves were actually taller than our guys. They were all 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". So by a lot of averages, you keep sticking balls in, they're going to get heads to it, and that's how we lost the game. So I wouldn't mind seeing Scales come into the team if he's a big lad playing at left back, because again, getting back to my simple view of football, I want 4 defenders, 4 big, strong defenders that got good physicality. That's what Martin O'Neill always had. And don't get messed about, don't get bullied, win all your set pieces, and let the footballers play the football. Maybe have 1 defensive midfield player. So you've got 5 defensive players and you get 5 attacking players. So I'd like to see more physicality in that back line. And if Scales is a tall player, then get him in as well, because that will help, because I think we have to sort that out. And that's no reflection on our defence at Ibrox, because I thought they were outstanding. I thought that was Starfelt's best game. I thought Wales played really well. But as I said, with a lot of averages, if you're up against teams that have got more players that are taller than you, chances are you're going to struggle a wee bit. In terms of Ralston, he's been outstanding this season. He keeps the jersey until his form starts to shade. I'd certainly play him tomorrow. And I'd like to maybe play Scales if he's got that kind of physicality. I suppose it's a bit of a balancing act. That, if you have these big, strong defenders, then maybe they're not very fast going forward. Maybe they don't offer you something like Greg Taylor would maybe offer you. But for me, that's where you look for your more offensive players to give you that kind of quality. Just defend, because their big Achilles heel last year was all the goals that we lost, particularly from set pieces. And then again, we lost at Tynecastle to a set piece, lost at Ibrox to a set piece. And although we're all very optimistic, and I'm very optimistic, but we actually pare the whole thing back and look at the league so far, we've won 2 games at home against teams we would be expected to beat, no matter who the manager is. So I think the cause for optimism is because our main rivals lost a game and they blew the chance to get £40 million in the Champions League. Because if they'd have qualified for the Champions League, and had won that game, and we were 6 points behind, different pressure altogether. But I've said before, if we get to the end of August, we're only 3 behind, I'd be perfectly happy with that. And he's done well getting us into the Europa League as well. That's exceeded expectations. So I'm off that tangent here, sorry. Anthony Ralston, play him tomorrow.
Yeah, and just before we move on to looking at a couple of the games coming up in the week afterwards as well, Jim, as you said, we didn't get your thoughts last week on the game against Rangers, so I just wanted to check before we go on to the next topic. What was your thoughts on Juranovic specifically? I thought he handled the atmosphere pretty well and looked as if he was good on the ball and had a good defensive defensive ability as well. That was my thoughts on how he played. What were your thoughts having watched him now?
I said it on the Friday before the game. I was a bit apprehensive about the back four trying to play the passing game, but they're outstanding. They were absolutely outstanding. Every member of the back four, and for the guy to come in to make his debut in front of 50,000 of opposition fans playing in their own position, I thought he was outstanding. I thought all the back four and Hart were fantastic. I thought Carl McGregor played well. I thought Turnbull and Christie were kind of nice and neat without. Because what we said before the game is every player has to be an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. And I would give that to the defence and Joe Hart and likely McGregor. Turnbull and Christie never did any damage. Maybe kind of 6s out of 10. Abada a 1 if you're lucky, didn't show up at all. And the decision to play Eddie through the middle meant that he was maybe a 3 out of 10 and Kyogo was a 3 out of 10. And Kyogo was up against a guy who's not a right back who wins man of the match. That tells its own story. And for people who say, well, if Eddie had scored, that'd be the difference. Eddie wasn't sharp enough to score. Eddie's been like that for me for the past 18 months. If he was sharp 18 months ago, Eddie would put that away, no problem. But the Eddie of now, don't think so. So too many people for me didn't show up. Ange made the wrong decision. We didn't have a depth of squad, and we lacked that physicality at the back. But apart from that, there is cause for optimism because we're playing a good brand of football. And I think the next away league game is it Livingston, I think?
Yes. Yep.
On the plastic, that'll be a big test because we're only ever one defeat or dropping points from an absolute crisis. We're all dead happy just now, but what if we go out tomorrow and we don't win? I think we will win, but we're always that one game away from that. So good to be positive, keep it going, but I think we do need that kind of plan B when we go away from home. Yeah.
Tony, Jim raises a good point and something we discussed ourselves on the show last Friday, that, we're banging in the goals at Celtic Park. You love to see the way that we're playing at Celtic Park. We've hit teams for 6 twice this season. 2 players have had hat-tricks. You couldn't really wish for anything better as far as the way we're playing at home. Away from home, it's been a different story towards the end of last season and obviously lost at Ibrox as well. We've got 2 massive away games this week against Betis and then against Livingston, who I think we agreed, the Tony Macaroni Stadium, there's something in that pasta, isn't there? We don't like it. We don't like it. Whether it's the plastic pitch or something else, it is a bit of a voodoo ground for us. So it's going to be a big week ahead for us if we can get some points out of the 2 away games, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't like the spaghetti hard, let's be honest, do we? That's a given. Yeah, but I agree with Jim. We have to, and we touched on this last week, we have to start winning away games or getting positive results. We got through Alkmaar, by virtue of scoring a goal, but we still lost the game. But that was kind of, lost over because it was a good result and got us into the Europa League group stages against a very good team. So that's fine, but it still didn't matter. Still masked the fact that, we've played what? Many away games have we played?
5, I think.
Yeah.
5, yeah, and we've not won any.
We won 1 against the Czech team.
Yes.
So, right, the Czech team. Yeah. So, and then we all know they weren't very good, were they? So that's fair enough. But we've gone to time.
That doesn't count.
Well, but they weren't great, well, let's be honest. I would expect Celtic to beat them. But we've gone to Tynecastle, we've gone to Ibrox, we've gone to Alkmaar and we've lost, right, against teams that, Alkmaar are a good side, Rangers are a good side, Hearts are just up from the Championship. So whilst it's not a massive worry per se, it's still there. I don't think the Celtic fans will put up with 1, 2, lose 2, that kind of stop-start to your season. They now want to go on a consistent run, and that means winning football matches, and that also means you have to go away and win football matches. Real Betis in the Europa Leagues, that'll be a contest, but take something from your away games. How many times have we said that we think that Celtic are a match for anybody at home in Europe? You have to learn to take points from your away games. So if they could go to Betis and get a point, I'd be quite chuffed with that. Anything more than that, a real bonus. But go and play a style in order to get a result. And Livingston, what is it about Livingston? Have Celtic ever gone to Livingston and battered them on the plastic? I can't.
Not to my recollection, no.
And nothing springs to mind. There's just something about playing that. And the irony is they train on that. I know Livingston pitch is particularly poor, but they're still playing on plastic. They train on plastic and stuff, so they should be used to playing on these surfaces. They'd always gone to Hamilton Accies ground and they battered them. They can't get a result for love or money in Livingston. I can't understand that. And I know the pitch is poor, but at some point, other teams can go and get a result. Rangers never seem to struggle. Aberdeen are one of those clubs that can go to Livingston and get a result. So teams like that can do it. Why can't Celtic? What's been the problem? Is it purely the pitch?
Jim, I'll ask you to answer the unanswerable question. Why can we not get points or good performances out of the team at the Tony Macaroni?
No idea. I think plastic pitch doesn't help. Tight ground doesn't help. I think anyone who's got a plastic pitch has a huge advantage. You're playing on it all the time. Maybe you have to be a wee bit more physical in these kind of games. We tend not to be that physical a team. We tend to knock the ball about. They tend to defend very well. It's not the fact Livingston have a pretty good record at home themselves against most teams. I know you said Aberdeen maybe won the Rangers won the. They don't go and batter them. I think the results last season were pretty tight against other teams in the top six. So there's no answer. Don't know. See, that's too hard a question. It's actually you asking Chris Ajer a question who doesn't have the answer. And he's struggling for something to say. And he might say something that I didn't mean to say.
Well, it's interesting that you bring
There's your example, Laura. There's your example. Well done. You've put into my hands there. I've just roped you in there. See, I am Chris Ajer. I didn't mean to say what I said. Sorry.
No, it's interesting that you say that about Christopher Ajer because Davy Provan and Barry Ferguson, and I'm going to get slaughtered in the comments for even bringing up anything that they said probably, but I was listening to them on Go Radio just after Christopher Ajer secured his move, and I think Davy Provan's words that were playing for Brentford was like village green football. No, sorry, it was Ryan Christie playing for Bournemouth was like village green football.
See, that's outrageous. That's an outrageous comment to make about anyone, I think. I don't mind people saying things like maybe he could have done a bit better or something. But see, when they make comments like that, I think that's outrageous. Because he has had time to write that column and he's picked those words very carefully. And I think that's an outrageous thing to say. By all means say, he's not as good a player as I think he is or he thinks he is or whatever. But I think the lie, and Tony will know this more than anyone, being the wordsmith that he is, words are really important. And you have to be careful with the words that you use. And that just sets the person up to think, that's unacceptable. For me, that's totally unacceptable.
I wasn't disputing what Christopher Ajer said, because I know he's gone to a better level of football and he's gone to better wages. I was just talking about the disrespect that he showed to the Scottish League and the team that made his name.
No, sorry. I wasn't having to go you, Tony. I was just having to go somebody who used the phrase.
I was clarifying what I meant by...
No. I think when people use those kind of words and those kind of phrases, I think that's unacceptable. I think they're just doing that for the shock value. Yeah. And what you're looking for is people who have been in the game. How would they like it if people describe them like that or decisions they have made like that? I think you have to be show a bit of respect. And I think that's very disrespectful in terms of Provan. Whoever said that, I think that's very disrespectful.
The reason I was bringing it up was because Paul Cooney was presenting the show and trying to get an idea of Ryan Christie swapping 60,000 Celtic supporters at Celtic Park for Bournemouth. What was the size of it? Davy Provan said it was like village green football, and Barry Ferguson actually said, to bring it full circle back to the conversation we were having, was that it was like playing in front of Livingston every week at the Tony Macaroni. And it was just an interesting point because it kind of brought a bit of context to the difference in atmosphere that Ryan Christie will be experiencing.
But I also think, Laura, sorry to butt in again, I also think that again, as fans, we have these ridiculous expectations of football players. When I first came on the podcast about 11 months ago, one of the first conversations I had with Paul, we were talking about how much players earn. And it's obviously it's no business of ours what people earn. And I said to him, well, maybe Ryan Christie earns about 15 grand a week, something like that. And Paul said, he earns 8. Right? definitive he earns 8. And he said, Roger's on 20. Right? And I'm thinking, see if I'm Ryan Christie, I'm out of here. Forget your 60,000 fans, forget your treble, stuff like that. This is my job. Right? And if you take anyone listening into this podcast just now who maybe works in an office, and the person sitting in the opposite desk from you is earning 2.5 times what you're earning, not contributing as much as you're contributing, is off sick half the time, how do you feel about that? Right? You're not very pleased about that. You want to leave that job, get a different job, because you're there. It's a job for you. You're not there as a Celtic fan, to sign You'll Never Walk Alone. That's his job. And I think if I was in Ryan Christie's position, I'm surprised he's lasted that long, if that's how you're treated. I also read something that it's only recently that the club have sat down with him. Right? So if those figures are true, every single week somebody earns £12,000 more than you do. Not a year, a week. 12 grand a week. And you're sitting there playing better than that person, contributing more than that person, and they're earning 12 grand a week more than you. You'd be completely scunnered about that, and you'd be desperate to get out. So I completely sympathise with Ryan Christie. I can understand Ryan Christie because he's not there as a football fan. If you're a Celtic fan, you wake up every morning and your first thought is, why did they play Edouard at Ibrox? Why did they do this? But if you're Ryan Christie, that's your job. You're not thinking that way. You're thinking it's a job. And I just think those kind of comments are kind of completely disrespectful. Because Ryan Christie, I think, is a very good player, international player. Needs a bit more respect than that. That's my rant over for today. I'm going to sit back now and watch Tony.
Oh, I just innocently was bringing up the fact that it was funny we were talking about struggling to get results at Tony Macaroni, and Ryan Christie is apparently going to play the English version of it. But
I'm ranting mood today, Laura. I'm just ranting. Last week, I'm making up for lost time. That's what I
can sense that, Jim. Sometimes these things get pent up, and that's what you come on here for.
Indeed.
A week's worth of words to get out, Jim.
That's it. Yeah.
No, it's going to be an interesting one. Just to close out the show, we've not talked about it very much. Obviously, this week kicks off our Europa League campaign. We've managed to get there, which is more than we thought we would manage to do, Tony. That's a positive place to start, isn't it, regardless of what happens in the next 6 group matches?
When the draw was made, weren't we, when we found out the teams, and I said at the time, bring it on. Let's have a rip at this. Let's have a go. I know Kyogo's out for next month and we'll miss a couple of those fixtures, but doesn't matter. The mindset doesn't change. We're trying to qualify. Let's go and try and qualify. Let's give it our all. It's a serious competition. Let's take it seriously. There's prestige in being involved in the group stages. There's prestige in playing the likes of a German and a Spanish team. Go and claim a couple of decent scalps, and have a rip at it. Because it builds confidence. It builds everything. And if you can go and beat a team like Real Betis or Bayer Leverkusen, you feel good about yourselves. And the more you win, the more you feel good about yourself. So don't disrespect this competition. Have a rip at it, and then see where we are. And if we come up short, so be it. We'll accept that. But we'll also accept, fine, we had a go. Don't be negative about this. Let's enjoy this experience, because that's an indication of progress, because we're far ahead of schedule in that than we thought we would be in terms of European football. So we've nothing to fear. None of those teams put the fear of death into me. I think we're comparable, if not better, certainly at home. We're going to show it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Jim. It's one of those situations, as Tony says, when we were waiting for the Michelin game in the Champions League qualifiers, we were not only writing off Champions League, we were wondering if Europa League would even be a possibility, and the fact that we're there is just something to look forward to. We've got European football between now and Christmas, and that's always a good thing, isn't it?
Totally agree with Tony, yeah. 5 weeks ago, we wouldn't have thought we'd be there. And if we were there, it'd be behind the couch stuff. So I think we'll be sitting on the couch watching the game Thursday. I think we're more confident than we were. Just to bring this full circle back to Jock Stein, Europe's always the benchmark. Europe's always the major. And we're never going to get to that heights again, but we need to be doing better than we've been doing over the past few years. Incrementally, we have to do better. We play a really nice, nice looking football. Go over there, do it again. I'm pretty optimistic in terms of the European campaign. albeit the most important things in the league, because I read some things people saying, well, with one eye in Europe. No eyes in Europe, 2 eyes on Ross County, and then Europe can take care of itself. I think we'll do okay. I think maybe Europe suits the big man's style of play. Because
I was going to say that, Jim. I was going to say, do you think they'll possibly get a bit more time in the ball and a bit more space to do what he wants us to do?
Absolutely. I think we're pretty open these games. I think in the SPFL against most of the teams, you're up against 10-man defences and what have you. I think, both games against AZ are fantastic games to watch. Really open, expansive, 2 teams going at each other. Fantastic to watch. Most of the games in Scotland are a bit of a chore to watch, even though if you win the game well, it's still kind of like attack v defence most of the time. But I think the European stage suits the big man, his style of football, and I'm fairly confident. We may not win on Thursday, but I think we'll play well. And if we play well, then we can take some heart from that. And I think we'll be in the mix. Come the last couple of games in this section, I think we'll still be in the mix, which is miles away from what we thought we would be 5 weeks ago, and that is a big achievement. But first things first, don't take our eye off the ball in terms of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Win tomorrow, and you can see whether we do that with us on A Celtic State of Mind. We'll be on air for our match coverage all the way from 3 o'clock kickoff, I think it is, tomorrow on a Saturday, which is a rare thing these days, but that is what's happening. So again, as always with Celtic State of Mind, it's a mystery at this point who's going to be joining us on the match day coverage, but you can assure there will be somebody there to either celebrate or commiserate with you, depending on the results. That has been A Celtic State of Mind for this week. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on the comments. Make sure and subscribe and like and comment below this post after we finish up. Thank you to Jim. Thank you to Tony for another fantastic week, and we will see you all again tomorrow.